Hello everyone and welcome to episode 15 of the Nurtured by Nature podcast. Today I'm delighted to be joined in conversation by the incredible Lucy. Lucy is the force behind Wild Roots Foraging and has a passion for helping people reconnect with the earth through the forgotten ancient practices of our ancestors. In this beautiful, honest and inspiring episode, we discuss our need to reconnect with what Lucy fondly calls earth wisdom. We explore our mutual love and respect for the weeds, our native wildflowers that are beneficial not only to our own health, but the intrinsic health of our desperately struggling ecosystems. She shares with me her incredible 10-year journey that has seen her transform her own health through foraging, and how she has gone on to find ways to share this wisdom and bring community and support into the lives of countless wild women and also wild men, so they too have a chance to flourish once more. Her final thought reminds us that at our core, we are all inherently foragers. Hello everyone and welcome Lucy, and thank you so much for joining us today on this episode of the Nurtured by Nature podcast. It's honestly really lovely to have you with me, and I'm so excited to hear more about your story and share what you're passionate about. I just like to start each episode by asking my guests a little bit about their nature story and how nature has been a part of your life and how that's maybe evolved over time, or just anything that you would like to share about your sort of memories of nature in your life.
Thanks for having me. Firstly, really excited to be on such a beautiful podcast. Love the messages you're trying to spread. It's brilliant. So my nature stories, yes, definitely first thoughts are definitely of childhood. I think that's where my journey begins. I think I was really lucky to be born in an area that it was still lots of houses and things, but there was a lot of green space around. There was a lot of trees, there was a lot of hedgerows, there was a lot of grassy places to sit and play. And it was a very safe area to kind of maneuver around as a child.
Okay,
you can just nice. Kind of move between on your bike quite safely and get to the next green space. So even my primary school, we had this fantastic hedgerow that went up right up the middle of the field, and it kind of divided the fields. And I think that was the original idea, to divide year groups. But it wasn't very kept, so it was quite nice. They were quite big, and they had like perfect seats and like kind of dens and houses within them. So I remember like spending a lot of time in there with my friends, and we'd be making each other cups of tea and like feeding the baby and stuff like that. And just making little homes within them. And then even like at the end of my road, there was another hedgerow that had another bush where I could hide in, and it had a seat so I could sit on it. I remember just thinking like, nobody can see me, this is brilliant, like I would like watch people go past. I'd even like make my mum look for me so just I could laugh at her. Because I could see her and she couldn't see me. And I spent a lot of time just sitting outside within those green spaces, connecting to the plants and the trees and the bugs. And I've got memories of talking to them, and like catching the seeds that fall from the trees, from the sycamore, and all sorts of lovely memories like that. And then I think I'm also lucky that I had a really engaged dad who spent a lot of time with me, and he would always take me out. So it wasn't just spending time with me inside. It was like, right, let's go to the park, right, let's go for a walk. And even as I got older in my teens, he would take me on a walk up the hills because that's what he liked to do. And he'd pack us some sandwiches and some coffees. And even one time he invited my friend, and I must have been about 14 or 15 at this point, and he took me up on the hills and he said, right, we're going to learn some how to use a map, basically. So here's the map. This is where you have to go. See you there. And he just dumped all this stuff and he ran off. And we were like, what? We were like pretty terrified, but we did it. And he obviously must have known that we could do it. But he put his, he'd do little things like that to kind of raise my resilience a little bit as well, I think. And I look back now and I'm like, God, I'm so glad he did that, because over time I lost it. I lost all of it. I lost my connection to nature. I lost my connection to self. And that's just part of life now, isn't it? Society gets its grip on you and it shapes you into something else. And I don't think we even think about that we have an option not to do that a lot of the time. It's just, well, this is what I need to do. So we do it and we change and we become something we're not. And then for me, and I think for a lot of other people, it gets to this point where you hit a wall and you go, and you have a bit of a breakdown. So you realise things aren't working for you anymore and it's actually making you ill. And I got to that point and I had a huge breakdown. And I realised that the traditional ways that we're encouraged to explore of healing, modern ways we're encouraged to explore of healing, that I did explore at first. I went on antidepressants and I calorie counted, that sort of thing. I was mentally and physically unwell, so I was like, this is what I'm being told to do.
They sort of focus on the body, really, don't they, rather than
absolutely. Wasn't working. I had a massive sugar addiction and I felt tired all the time, and I was starting to get arthritis in my hands as well. Like early 20s. So not good. And just generally like feeling really bad. And I think that I started to explore natural healing, and I think it probably came a bit easier to me because of those early experiences with nature. So I suppose I had some sort of like deep trust for nature, maybe because of those early experiences of connection, because I know it doesn't come easy for everybody to trust natural remedies instead.
We're sort of we're told not to, aren't we? That's the sad part about it. And but it sounds like your body was screaming out to you, like, and the screams were getting louder, and it was saying, no, Lucy, it's time to do something about.
That's it. And I also I pushed myself with education, so I didn't do very well in school. And I recognise now that the trauma that I've experienced in life and living not authentically as me was really affecting my concentration at school, which, basically all the symptoms of ADHD, but I do see the trauma started that. The things that I've been trying wasn't working. So, I was on antibiotics a lot over the years in my life. And I feel like, I was getting infections a lot, like water infections or throat infections or ear infections. I would just get infected all the time, and I was always needing antibiotics. I realised how important education was on my journey as well. So I really pushed it, didn't do well in school, but I knew how important it was to my own empowerment, to my own autonomy and financial security. And I pushed and pushed and pushed, and I ended up being like an adult learner. So at first it didn't work. I had to do some healing. Then I went back to college and eventually cracked it. I went to art college, and then I had the most amazing teacher who didn't give up on anyone and just was so very like positive and like helped us to see our potential instead of like putting us down, which is what I'd experienced in school. And she got me to go to university, and I'm gonna feel so emotional even talking about that now. And I did a graphic design degree.
Oh wow. Oh, amazing.
And during like that university experience was so important because, especially the essays part, they got us to think critically, they got us to do good research, and like Wikipedia isn't good enough, you've got to have lots of reliable sources and all of this, right? So that taught me so much, because then I had the skills to look at those methods that had been being recommended to me And suddenly I was able to find all this scientific research that was proving that it wasn't the way to go. It was
Yeah.
actually being more detrimental because all those antibiotics that I'd been given were actually destroying my gut microbiome. I was going to develop resistance for them in the future
Yeah.
if I continued on that path, and how important the gut microbiome actually is. And then that led me on to like things like pesticides as well, and how that's killing off our gut microbiome.
Yep.
Literally,
Yeah.
like all of the chemicals that are in everything that I am putting on my body and in my body. And I'm like, and that link between the gut and the brain and our emotions and how we're feeling. And I'm like, no wonder my mental health and my physical health is suffering.
Yeah.
I'm literally just poisoning myself every single day. And I started to recognize that things had to change. And I wasn't there yet though with it. Like I had a lot of years of research to do before I really got somewhere with it. And then I fell pregnant and then had my babies, and this is where I had like more breaking down of, realizations of how women are treated, and how that's affecting how our babies are developing from an early age, and the trauma that we all experience as parents, and in our early years, and how that's affecting things as well.
I think it's really hard, isn't it? Because I think in many aspects, like there's been a breakdown in the true sort of support and community feel that is in our society. So when become a mother, I mean, sort of ancestrally, you would have been supported by your family and your village and that the sort of wise motherhood of, elders, wouldn't you? And now it's kind of, that's all been taken away from you, and you're just told it's supposed to be the happiest time of your life. And
It's feel bad if
yeah,
you
yeah,
don't, if you're not fully enjoying yourself, or like, you show any signs of not being happy with what you've been given,
yeah,
but they're gonna grow up so quick, and
yeah,
you'll miss it, and stop worrying. And this is the problem. We are constantly taking power away from mothers constantly. So I had to fight as a mother for so many things just to be heard, just
yeah.
to have my view on things trusted.
I
Like
think
that was
that's,
a big thing.
yeah, that is a
Nobody
huge thing,
trusted.
isn't it? They
Mm-hmm.
they sort of, they kind of make you feel quite stupid, like,
Yeah,
oh, you're just a regular
terrifying.
person, you can't know anything, and it's like, but
Especially
yeah,
women, like especially women, or it's like this thing that we've been passed down. I don't know if anybody knows the history of how women have been treated in the mental health industry over time, but we still carry some of that now, this view that women are just hysterical and they must just need medicating, or like, this disease attached to them, disorder attached to them. And so it was really hard to be heard. So I had like, even from the start, I want to breastfeed. And the amount of pushback I had on that, oh no, like, you won't be able to do that. Oh no, like it's really hard from the start, really negative responses. And then when I did start breastfeeding, it's like the amount of advice I got from people who didn't breastfeed and didn't know anything about it.
yeah,
Even like the health visitors, oh, I didn't breastfeed, and they don't get any training. I've learned that because I became a breastfeeding peer supporter. I have more training than health visitors in
oh
breastfeeding,
wow,
yet they
wow,
give advice. It's
yeah,
like you don't know what you're talking about, so why are you giving advice? You're not qualified to give advice. I wasn't qualified to give advice. I was only qualified to give information,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
that empowered the mothers to make their
So
own choices.
yeah, that's it. So you're sort of a neutral advisor, basically saying, well, this on this side,
Yeah.
this
These
is,
are your
yeah,
options. These are the facts. You
yeah,
decide what to do with that information. and I wasn't getting that. I had the manhandling of the boob and the baby by the midwife.
oh,
She actually like grabbed my boob and shoved it in my baby's mouth. So we don't even have ownership of our bodies.
yeah. I was going to say that's quite intrusive, isn't it? It's like,
Yeah. She's like, well,
yeah,
I can do it. There you
yeah,
go. You should be able to do it. Just do that. And then she left, and I was like, well, I can't do it. Turns out my baby had a tongue tie, and
oh
nobody
God, bless you.
recognized, and I was getting the blame. And
Yeah,
tongue ties are huge, but nobody's acknowledging it,
yeah,
because that means that it's going to cost a lot of money to change how we do things. So the
yeah.
NHS doesn't have that kind of cash right now, does it? So
Yeah. I mean, we're very lucky to have a healthcare system, but it does have limitations, and one of them
especially
is trying
when
to get people sort of through it and out of it as quick as
yeah,
possible, isn't it? Is
it is.
really, particularly with mothers, it's like, you're sort of on a conveyor belt, aren't you? It's in and
Yeah.
out and off you go.
But yeah, so I had all of that, and I had, anytime there was a problem, like I would go to the doctor and I'd be like, I've got breastfeeding peer support training, my baby's got thrush, I need this cream. And they'd be like,
Yeah.
they'd sign for something else, and I'd have to go
Yeah.
back, and I'd have with a printout, like, this is what I need,
Yeah.
and yeah, just time after time, like I just wasn't heard. Even when I went and did like counseling sessions and CBT and things, I
Yeah.
feel like there was so much judgment every
Yeah.
step of the way, so much like pointing out my failures all the time, telling me how I needed to fix my life all the time.
Yeah.
And there was just so much that really impacted me, and I really did have a huge mental breakdown and got really angry about everything.
Yeah, because well, I
Um,
mean, you're just being disempowered, aren't you, all the time, and told to disconnect as well. Disconnect from, you can't know what you're feeling, so don't feel it basically, and yeah,
Absolutely, that's it. So
yeah,
it's through this breakdown that, like, I'm really grateful for the breakdown, because like what I recognize now, what is commonly called a mental breakdown, I recognize now is it's actually just a breakdown of all those beliefs and systems that have been given to me
in
since birth,
suffocating you
and
basically. Yeah.
suffocating me, and they needed knocking down. And then it was kind of, I've been rebuilding it ever since. And so it started off with reconnecting with nature, because when I was doing my research on antibiotics, I was like, I'm not going to do antibiotics. I need to find another way. So I started to research what I could do instead. It turns out it's really easy to not have antibiotics, right? But they're just not giving us this information. I have not had an antibiotic since, and that was 13 years ago.
Yeah, I don't. I'm the same. My doctor probably doesn't even know my name in all honesty. But yeah, I don't know when I last had antibiotics.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
makes such a difference. And a lot of the things I was researching for, like, whichever condition I was having, a lot of the time there was like things that I could forage myself.
Okay.
That's what I was noticing. I was
Yeah.
like, at first I started off in like Holland and Barrett, spending fortune,
Yeah.
like health food shops. But then eventually I was like, hang on a minute, nettle. Well, I've got nettles in the back garden.
Yeah.
And I think, again, like, because of the things I've been reading about chemicals, me and my husband had also decided to start growing our own food.
Okay. Yeah.
And when we did that, immediately I was reconnected with nature. I had my hands in the soil. I could smell the chemicals from the earth, and they
Yeah.
were going back inside my body, taking
And you're
me back.
connected to the plants as well as they're growing, aren't you? You're nurturing them, and you go out and you're like, oh, how are you today? And like,
And
yeah.
I found that as I was doing certain jobs in the garden, these like epiphanies were just coming to me, like stories as old as time, and I didn't know where they were coming from. But it was wisdom. It was wisdom that was coming
Yeah.
to me. Like, I remember picking out dandelions and like digging them out and being like, I need to get these roots out, And then all of a sudden I realized, like, getting to the root of the problem, and like, and it was just like, oh my God, that is literally wisdom from the earth. We say that all the time,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that's earth wisdom.
Yeah.
And how old is that wisdom? How long
Yeah.
have we been saying that for? It
Yeah.
must be thousands of years, maybe even longer than that.
Yeah.
Um, and it's, these little messages come to me whenever I connect with nature, and they come to me from the earth, from whatever activity it is that I'm doing with the earth. And it's just like, whether it's just you see it as an epiphany, whether we're just connected, putting two and two together, and all of a sudden we realize something. But I think that was the way it was meant to be.
Mm.
So it's been therapy for me as well.
I think
And
that's the lovely thing, isn't it? It's about remembering and reconnecting rather than necessarily learning something new, isn't it? Although it feels new, but
yeah,
it's something that's kind of, when you learn it, it feels like it's always been there and it's been a part of you. It's not,
exactly.
you're not adding something
Been
new.
there
You're
the whole
just like
time.
discovering something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that I realized is actually this wisdom nobody's telling me this. I'm coming up with it myself. It's inside me already. And I just needed the space with nobody going, me, you need to do this, you need to do that, which was blocking me, like being able to think and get to the wisdom for a start, but also that connection to nature where I can actually learn lessons from what we see around us. And we see historically humans have just done that. Like a lot of the things that we design and then we see around and we use every day, that technology came from nature. It was inspired by nature. Velcro, for example, that comes from the burdock, or like the other plants that are very similar to burdock, where they have these hook hairs on their seeds. And somebody went, that's a great idea. I'm going to create Velcro. A lot of the things that we do today have been inspired by nature. And that's that inner wisdom that we can access when we connect to nature. And I'm like, oh, this is so powerful. People need to know this. So this is like where Wild Women was born as well, and the foraging as well, because originally it was like, it's helped me so much through plant medicine, through the wisdom, through the connection, through the peace and the clarity, just like that chance to unwind, to breathe, to get oxygen, all of these amazing benefits. And I just know that so many other people need that.
I love the fact that you say it's what's important about foraging to you as well is about it is accessible to everyone. Like it's this healthy, nutritious larder that it doesn't matter if you live in a flat and have no garden, you can get out there and find these plants and they can help you and provide like healthy, nutritious, whether it's food or medicine. And I think that's a really important message, isn't it? Because sometimes for a lot of people they feel like they can't do it because their circumstances doesn't allow them to. But I mean, I love that your part of your story was you started in a town and city, and you don't have to be like have a big garden or be in a rural landscape.
Absolutely. I don't know if anybody's ever seen pictures of Middlesbrough before. It is just like industry town, like, and to look at it, you would think you can't forage there, but there is green pockets everywhere, and especially weeds. Like it's something we really need to start encouraging our councils to stop spraying the weeds and to let them flourish, because not only does nature return, not only is it better for our air and things like that, but we can forage. Then we can eat with it. We can
and they're brilliant for like the insect life and the birds and things as well. It's just like our
absolutely.
whole this biodiversity crisis that we're facing is partly because we're our weeds are our native plants and we're eradicating them because we don't think that they're attractive or useful or pretty, so we called them weeds and had to weed them out, didn't we, as well? So
That's it. Yeah. Absolutely. But so I started in Middlesbrough. There's a Victorian park called Albert Park, which is the town's green space, really. There's not many of them in Middlesbrough. So this is a really great place. It's full of trees. There's kids' parks, there's lots of grass, there's lots of and there's lots of weeds as well. Weeds. And I have so many lovely memories when I lived in Middlesbrough. I live in Gisborough now, closer to the hills and things, which I've only lived here 4 years. But at the time, just wandering around there and like, foraging brambles and going home and making bramble crumble, and even like finding a huge patch of cowslips, and it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And I was like, oh my God, they're gorgeous. And I was like picking some, took some home to put in a jar. I didn't have a clue about them at the time. And I know lots more about them now. I know all of their medicinal properties, and that you can literally eat them and they taste nice and they're protected as well. So you only forage them from or they're rare, basically. They're not fully protected, but they're rare. So you only forage them from areas of abundance too, and be really respectful and try and help them spread their seeds as well so they can return. And unfortunately,
I think that's important, isn't it? Is being responsible in foraging as well, and being conscious of not like stripping everything, just taking a little bit for yourself, making sure you leave the plants enough to survive the stuff for the animals and the insects and birds as well.
Absolutely. So, so important. We've got to remember that, we are nature. And when we're abusing nature, we're abusing ourselves. And it has a detrimental effect on us. All these years of farming intensively, literally deforesting the planet. And look where we all are now, because of greed, because of capitalism, because of globalization. Everybody just wants more money and more power. We're at that space now, and now we're really poorly now as a species, and we have other species dying out every day, and they're really poorly too. And our planet's really poorly, and it's like we're not getting anywhere with this. It's not working for us, and I really think that we need to start returning back to variety, back to abundance in nature, because actually even the microbiome science that's coming out now is proving that those who have the most amount of bacteria, different types of different strains of bacteria, the more strains of bacteria that you have in your gut, the healthier you are, the less you'll get ill, the longer you'll live. And you're not going to get that from eating the same 5 things on your plate every day, we eat
especially when they've been produced through sort of intensive factory farming as well,
killing the bacteria as well, the sprays and the chemicals and things. And so we really need to get back to variety by having as many different plants in our diets as possible. And that's really easy to do when you forage, because you're just literally adding it in. You can still eat your everyday daily things that you're used to eating, but I just a lot of the time I'm just adding it in now as well. So I've got more in there and more nutrients, and those nutrients are what makes me strong, stops me getting ill. I've not been ill at all this winter, not at all.
Oh, wow. So you've got a wonderful Facebook community, which is it Wild Roots, Wild
Women, yes.
Wild Women, that's it. And I would definitely encourage anyone listening to go and find you. I'll put the links in for them to find you. But I love seeing the pictures of, what you create with with foraged food is just on this amazing level. These lovely, amazing, they just make my mouth water sometimes. I see your incredible posts and pictures. And
that's my next passion. Is for me, I had to learn foraging for years on my own, and then I would find that something's edible and I'm like, great, how do I eat it? How do I process it? What do I do with it? And then there's this big gap, and you have to go off on a tangent to research that, and we don't have a lot of time. So my goal is to kind of share those ideas and recipes, so people can be, even if they don't do the exact recipe, they can be like, oh, but I can use it like that. Oh, I didn't know that, and it inspires them, and then they've just got a general idea of how things can be used. And it's something that now I know it's really easy to incorporate in, but until you get to that point, it's hard.
It is hard when you've never done it before, isn't it? My sort of introduction with foraging was actually through my horses, and I had a horse that was similar to you. He had a disease and was quite ill, and modern medicine didn't have really a solution for him, and we tried the treatment a few times and it didn't really help him. So I started just taking him out, and I was in touch with a herbalist, and she was saying do this and do this, and then we'd just go out and he'd forage in the hedgerows, and I'd watch what he was eating, and I'd be like, oh, what's he eating, and what's that good for, and go back and learn all the plants and what they're, and it's amazing how much is just on the sort of roadside verges, and just incredible. But I love it because you do walks as well, don't you? You do organise foraging walks, so that if someone has never got any experience, they don't, they've never really looked at a plant, they don't know how to identify anything, they can come along and join you and learn.
And people are always so shocked on those walks. They're like, I thought we would be walking miles to find this food. And they're like, I've literally walked a few yards. We've been introduced to 10 different edible plants. It's amazing how much is out there that we can eat. And we're so surprised. It's like, what? This has been sat here this whole time, and I can eat it, and it's nutritious and it tastes good. It's just incredible. And then another thing that I do as well is I also, because when I find it hard if I've been on an event and they've told me something and I'm like, wow, mind blown. And then I go home and I'm like, can't remember anything.
Yeah.
So I've put together like a good foraging guide. So everybody who comes on my walks gets my good foraging guide.
Oh, brilliant.
And inside there, it's like the important stuff really that I talk about at the beginning of every walk, where I cover the law, how to forage safely, how to forage sustainably, the things to avoid, the benefits, the caveats, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
That's just really important. The things that stop us from foraging, because I don't want anything to stop people from foraging. I don't want them going, oh my God, am I going to get in trouble for this? Or I better not do it in case somebody tells me off. Or, oh my God, I'm going to poison myself.
Yeah.
It's a really simple process that we can use to make sure we don't poison ourselves. So I give that away and I put it in my good foraging guide so you can remember it.
Yeah.
You're not
Because
going
that
away.
is really important, because I think I mean I've done things with like essential oils and things like that, and there is sometimes a belief that as it's natural it's completely safe, and that's not the case. And yeah, so it does need to be done with sort of
Yeah.
mindfulness and attention and
Mhm.
consideration, whilst it is accessible to everyone, like actually investing in or either joining groups like yours, or I mean there's some lovely groups, aren't there, that will help people with identification and things, and if they're not
Absolutely.
sure, and just finding someone that can give you that start if you've got no experience of it at all
Yes,
is
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, we need to reach out to each other as well again, because we were supposed to learn as a community, and from learning from each other, from our elders, from those who had a bit more experience than us, and just passing all that knowledge down. And we're so segregated now, we're so separated from each other, and we find ourselves like having to read books on our own and go online on our own and things like that, and it's not very natural. So I do like encourage people to. This is why I started the group as well, because I wanted a space where people can connect and help each other and support each other and share information. And just, I know it's online still, unfortunately we can't all have, we're not
Yeah.
quite there yet with the going back to having our villages and that sort of lifestyle, but I still think connection is key. It's so important. And I do have another group as well, where anybody can join. So that obviously the Wild Women group is women only, but then I've got another one that anybody can join as well. So yeah, just so
Yeah,
you're aware.
because I've seen as well, I don't know if it's new or you've been doing it for a while, but you've also you're doing like wild men as well, aren't you? Which is beautiful as well, because as well as the foraging, you've partnered with a great gentleman, haven't you, who also does these beautiful support circles for men as well. Because I think, like, obviously women, we've obviously suffered a lot of suppression and separation and things, but there is there's also a struggle for a lot of men as well, isn't there, in
Huge. Yeah.
society, especially men, I think, who are in touch more with their feminine aspects, and they also find that the society is leaving them a bit like you suffered with, sort of broken, basically, isn't it? And
Completely broken. I think in some aspects like there are things that are much worse for men, because I guess at least with women it's okay for us to socialize and network and open up with each other, and we've always had that, and men really haven't. And if in fact as children they were even punished for like showing emotions
yeah,
that are, unless it was anger, or if
yeah,
they were crying, if they were sad
yeah.
or anything
Real
that
men don't cry, kind of.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and
yeah,
that's it. They were literally punished for it or abused for it. I've heard some really, really sad stories. And the thing is, these men grew up never realizing that there was anything wrong with it as well.
yeah,
That they deserved it. And they carry that deep shame around with no outlet.
yeah.
And I'm a big believer in I don't run circles for mental health. I don't run circles to fix you, or anything like that. We are all equal, right? We've all got our own demons that we carry.
Yeah.
Everybody in society. There's nobody who has good mental health and bad mental health in this world, right? We have different baggage, we have different experiences, and we have responses to those experiences that are very normal and
And
very human.
and it's also I think it's important that we don't attach our identity to any label we might have been given as well, because it's,
Mhm.
you know, our mental state and our emotions are transitory as well, aren't they? So whilst you might be having a particularly awful time at the moment, like, you're not what you're labeled as. It's just something that you're going through, and you can move through it. So
Absolutely. And I think that's why people get stuck, because they're
yeah,
like, what's wrong with me? Why can everybody else cope and I can't? Like I'm bad. There's something like inherently wrong with me, and they get stuck there. But this is the good thing: when we connect with other people, when we hear their stories, we go, oh, it's not just me.
yeah, yeah.
You know,
The
like,
relief floods
oh
through
my God,
you,
I'm
doesn't it?
so
Yeah,
glad other people feel like that or experience that. So we've
yeah,
got nobody telling us, right, I think you should fix yourself like this and with a
yeah,
pen, like we've got
yeah,
nobody doing that. Nobody. We're in a circle, we're equal, right? We're just sharing our stories.
yeah.
And
Just being seen and heard, like that
yeah.
we mentioned earlier. Just, you know, having that sort of, I don't want to say validation because that's not quite right, but
But it is
just,
validation as
yeah,
well. Yeah, absolutely. And this is the thing we need as well. We need our emotions validated, and nobody does that. Like, we live in a world where the second we open up about anything, like, oh my God, I feel really nervous about that, somebody will turn around with all intents being really good, but well intended, but they'll turn around and be like, oh, don't be nervous, or don't
yeah,
be scared, or
yeah,
don't feel like that.
yeah.
Oh, see the positive, and somebody's always telling us how to feel, how not to
How to
feel.
fix it? Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's it. Instead of just being like, yeah, that makes sense.
yeah,
Um, Totally makes sense. You've got this big scary thing coming up and you feel scared about it. God, I would feel like that as well if that was me. Validation is so important. And that's what moves us from being stuck. When we're stuck thinking there's just something wrong with us, we're broken.
yeah.
It's the validation that moves us from that place into, oh, I'm not broke.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
normal. I'm human, just like
yeah.
everyone.
But it is like, it's just this wave of relief, isn't it? It's like, oh my goodness, it's not just me. It's not just me. It's like there
Yeah.
are other people who are experiencing it or have felt it, and yeah,
Because that's the birthplace of shame, isn't it? When we think we're broken, we think
yeah,
there's something bad and inherently wrong with us. And that's what keeps us out of that logical brain where we can think, we can make good decisions, and we can realize, oh, that everything's fine. I'm going to move past this. That's where resilience is. Um, and we get stuck and we can't access that. And that's why it's so important, isn't it? We need people
yeah.
to feel good about themselves again and go, oh, I'm not broke. I'm
I
fine.
think it is, and it's. I think I've spoken to quite a few people now, and a common thread is always the sense of community alongside everything. And I mean, community can be non-human as well. And I think you know, like you were talking earlier about your childhood and the trees, and you know, they were a part of, you know, the insects and things, and that was a part of your community and your shared experience. And but it is just, that's why I love what you do. I think it's really powerful, is like not only you making these healthy, nutritious options available to people, and some people have, you know, like you said, you went to health food shops and they might not have the budget for that, so being able to help themselves is, well, it's empowering as well, isn't it? It's, you know, that like being able to take a little bit of control back and be like, well, I could do this for myself,
Yeah.
is just a really, it's a beautiful gift to give people, really. It's
It
yeah,
is. That's the place we really need to be. I think we are at this point now where we're realizing how detrimental capitalism is in so many ways on people and planet. The systems we have in
yeah,
place are just failing us massively. The sheer amount of food banks in Britain now is
yeah,
shameful, really,
yeah.
and I just see this opportunity there. If only I could get this message out that
Yeah, and
we
it's, I
can
mean,
take charge.
the food banks are, they're sad. I mean, obviously they're, I'm so glad that we've got them and people have that option, but it makes me sad as well because they don't provide people with like really lovely, nutritious food a lot of the time either, do they? You know,
Mhm.
it's a lot of processed, you know,
Mhm.
canned and packaged food, and
Yeah,
which obviously, you know, some food is better than no food, so I'm not judging that, but like
absolutely.
I'm just saying that to be able to layer that with the foraging and like you said, add those little bits to your diet, to your food.
That's it.
It's just, yeah, it's amazing. It's a great gift to give people.
It is, and it's like I said, people are always so surprised at how just how easy it actually is, you know, once they learn. And people think, oh, it's going to take me such too long, you know, I'll never learn it. I think that's what's good about actually me as an example as well, because I haven't always foraged since
Yeah,
being a child, you know. I did have this big gap where I wasn't doing any of that, and I was living really like I was eating takeaways all the time and just like anything, not thinking about my health really, drinking, you know, partying constantly, not looking after myself. And then it's literally only the past decade that I've learned all of this. So it's doable, you know, and even like, you know, a decade to teach it.
yeah.
So let's go even further back to actually just integrating it into our life. That's like half that, you know. So it doesn't take that long, really doesn't, to get this knowledge back. And obviously I'm still learning, I'm still on that journey. We'll always be learning because there's so much out there to learn about.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
and that's, I mean, that's the excite. I find that exciting. I love that every time I speak to a guest, or every day I'm like, wow, I like, you know, there's, and science, you know, and there is so much science out there as well. Like you touched on that as well. It's like if you're doing your research and not just, you know, the first website that pops up on Google or something, but there is so much science that backs up like the medicinal and health benefits of our weeds. we Yeah, it's just I get excited.
you know why? Because they're deep rooters and they're grounded.
Yeah,
That's why. So it literally is the root systems. They're like pulling up all of the goodness from deep below ground for us. And our own foods that we're eating today in the supermarket don't do that. They don't have deep roots. So like, but there's a lesson in that as well, isn't it? Because the more rooted we are, the more grounded we are, the more we nourish ourselves.
well,
And
I was just, as you were talking, I was thinking that how like weeds are pioneers as well, and they often have this ability to grow in like quite harsh environments, and you know the less prime um sort of soils and things, you know, on the peripheries of
yeah,
things, and they hold on, and I was thinking of that as like a sort of metaphor for like what our society's going through as well at the moment. And yeah,
that's it. The wisdom just comes, doesn't it? It's amazing. It's so, so special. And I just want more people to experience that, you know, like, because that's where true empowerment really lies, just living our authentic selves. That's what I think our real authentic selves looks like as well, being so deeply connected to nature, because we are nature, you know.
yeah,
So if you're not connected to nature, then you're not living authentically. Uh,
no, no, that's it. You've shut off a part of yourself, haven't you? Really, you've disconnected from part of who you are.
Absolutely.
And it is sad because it is sort of ingrained in our society, that this sense that we are separate from nature. You know, there's some interesting books that you can read about how this sort of evolved in our human society, and you know, a few people had these ideas that actually, you know, humans were the top of the pyramid and we were superior and separate, and actually how that has just literally rippled out and pervades our whole sort of thought about nature and society. And actually, if we take a step back and look to more sort of I suppose their sort of indigenous worldview, isn't it?
Mhm.
And we there's a lot that they have to share that we can learn from their view of being a part of the natural world, the natural cycles, and I think that's powerful as well, because sometimes we see ourselves as the enemy to nature, don't we? And actually, we need to sort of step into our role to be a part of nature, and
Yeah,
we can be supportive of it.
yeah.
Um,
Well, our original role was guardians of nature. We were the
yeah,
guardians. We were the caretakers. We were looking after the world and making sure it thrived. And in return, we were provided abundance.
yeah,
And again, for more like archaeological evidence that's been dug up recently is proving that our ancient ancestors, they didn't struggle for food.
no,
They had everything they needed. So yeah, like, you know, I think it is a common perception, oh, we really struggled back then, but we didn't. So yeah, it's as soon as we stopped living so closely connected with nature in that way, as guardians, that's when we started to struggle.
But then there's a disconnect from the actual fact that we're struggling now, isn't there? So yeah, it's like we look back and go, oh, but they really struggled, and it's like, well, actually, have a look in the mirror. How is our society doing now? Like yourself, people struggling with mental health issues. There is a lot of struggle in our modern society. It's just perhaps a different element that's sort of to the fore with that struggle, but it's still struggle, isn't it? So
It is.
yeah. Oh, well, it's been lovely talking to you, Lucy. It sort of feels like we're getting to a natural place to sort of round up. I don't know, is there anything else that you would like to, any sort of messages on your heart, I suppose, that you would like to share to the listeners about foraging, or just anything that sort of pops up for you?
Just don't listen to that voice that tells you, I can't do this, this isn't for me, because it's for everybody. This is how we started. We were foragers for the majority of human existence. That's a massive portion, is a very, very tiny percentage of time in the time frame that we have not been foraging. We are all inherently foragers. We are all supposed to be that deeply connected to nature. That is where authenticity lies. So if you're telling yourself, it's not for me, I can't do that, it's not true, that's coming from another place, and I really encourage you to question it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love the way you've just framed that. I'd not actually put that together myself. The fact that, yeah, we are inherently foragers, and it's, it goes back to what we were saying earlier, doesn't it, about remembering and reconnecting rather than, forging a new path. And yeah, that's really powerful. I really love that. Thank you so much, Lucy. It's
Thank
just,
you.
yeah, it's been a pleasure, and I'll put in the show notes the information for people to look you up and see if they're local to you, or if I think you've got also information about, because you're a member of the Association of Foragers, aren't you? So if there's people who aren't local to you, they can perhaps find someone who's nearer to them to go and learn from and explore this amazing world. Well, it's been brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for listening to the Nurtured by Nature podcast. I truly hope this conversation has brought some hope and inspiration into your life. I would love to have these messages ripple out across the world. So if you can, please share this episode with your friends, leave a review on your favourite podcast player, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. I would love to hear from you, so please feel free to connect with me on the links provided in the podcast description. But most importantly, thank you so much for being a part of this journey with me. But don't forget to simply get out there and enjoy the natural world.